Here. Okay, so I'm just going to kick it off with my intro, and then and then we'll go from there. And you saw, I mean, we were pretty well prepared. So,
Yeah.
so, 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 hello everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Lessons in Building Cyber Resilience. I'm Greg Rabine, and I help security solution providers scale using AI-powered systems so they can grow revenue predictably. And I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, Josh Moulin, principal at Natsar. And the first thing I'd like to do is just run through the topics for today. And we'll start with having Josh introduce himself and tell us about his background, his experience, and his journey. And then we'll explore trends Josh is seeing in the industry, such as common cybersecurity challenges for S&MBs, say around 500 to 200 employees. And we'll talk about opportunities and challenges. So a tremendous opportunity in our space now is AI. But the challenges of AI, how do you align an AI and AI ambitions with the reality of governance, compliance, and risk management? And then we'll wrap things up on Josh's thoughts on where things are headed, his vision for the future of S&MB cybersecurity. So I am pleased to introduce Josh Moulin. Hello, Josh.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me here today.
You're very welcome. So it'd be great if you can kick it off and tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and your journey to having being a cybersecurity solutions provider.
Sure. Well, my journey is a little bit unique, I think, in how I eventually got into cybersecurity, but I started actually my cybersecurity career when I was in law enforcement. So I was a patrol officer and was always kind of good with technology, where I was the person in the office that if people had a problem with Microsoft Word or something like that, they would just come to me because I'd always been, building my own computers in high school and that sort of thing. One thing led to another. We started seeing cyber crime happening where parents were saying, I've got a child that's been exploited on MySpace, or somebody lost money on eBay. And there really wasn't anybody doing anything from a criminal investigative standpoint at that time. This is around 2001, 2002. So I made a pitch to take my law enforcement experience and my knack for computers and merge them and start a high-tech crimes unit. It eventually got approved. I went to school and became a certified forensic computer examiner. And really, one thing led to another. And over 7 of my 11 years in law enforcement, I grew a multi-jurisdictional regional cyber crimes task force, was deputized by the FBI and the U.S. Marshal's Office, and did really a bunch of cybersecurity type cases, everything from child exploitation to white-collar crime to fraud and intrusions and all those sorts of things. I then went and started in federal national security. I was the chief information security officer and eventually the chief information officer for the Nevada National Security Site out in the middle of the desert outside of Las Vegas. And then I worked at Gartner, the world's largest IT research and advisory firm, where I was an executive partner, really advising Fortune 500 and federal government executives in everything: technology, risk management, leadership, etc. And then I was the senior vice president at the Center for Internet Security, CIS, of operations. So I ran the multi-state information sharing and analysis center and provided all of their leadership for their 24/7 operations there. And then started Natsar, a cybersecurity company that I'm the founder and principal of. And now I'm doing this kind of work on my own and have really enjoyed working with a lot of small businesses too in cybersecurity matters.
Wow, what a tremendous, robust background you have. Very impressive. But, you've led cybersecurity at the highest levels, from national security environments, state governments, and now NASTAR. So tell us a little bit about what motivated you to bring this expertise into a boutique advisory role.
Yeah, well, I have always enjoyed working in cybersecurity, and I really enjoy helping other people along their journey, whatever that may be. So One thing I really enjoy, I started Natsar as a side hustle, really, and once it got busy enough where I could support myself full time, I decided to make the leap into my own business. And that's, for anybody who's done that, it's a little unnerving, and but it's been good. I've been very blessed, and I think that the one thing that really led me to offer this kind of service is being able to work with multiple different clients and lots of different industry verticals and helping them get from wherever they're at today to where they need to be from a security standpoint is very fun for me. And I've had the opportunity to work on behalf of the US government, even in this position, with countries around the world, helping them build cyber strategies, or maybe a little mom and pop manufacturing shop down the street from me getting CMMC compliance or something like that. So it's the range of what I get to do is really what is exciting.
Awesome. That is very exciting. And I guess what got my attention was when I was reviewing your website is how you productize your expertise. So turning incident response and governance playbooks into practical tools. And this seems to be a very different approach from most consulting firms.
Yeah, well, one of the things I had noticed was organizations all seem to have the same challenges, and for the most part, I mean, everybody's got a little bit uniqueness, but one of the things was people just lacked the basic blocking and tackling things that you need for compliance sometimes, which is, do you have a policy? Do you have plans? Do you have checklists and all of that? And having done especially incident response and forensics for a large part of my career, I saw that that's definitely one area that people lacked, having any type of robust documentation. So I put together some checklists and policies and plans all based on NIST and other best practices to help organizations at least start somewhere with customizable forms and templates to get them on their way. And that's really how that all started. And then now I do a lot of the advisory where I might package those things as part of an engagement with someone, but then help them customize them and then even do tabletop exercises and things like that to really put it into practice.
Awesome. So I guess when we talk about and you touched on it, your clients, your targets, small and medium size up to enterprise level. So what is the in your mind? What is the different approach for each organization, or is there not a different approach? Is it more around discovery and just understanding how they're doing the basic blocking and tackling?
Yeah, I think to some degree, a lot of organizations need to comply with the same types of regulations or industry best practices, and it does depend on what kind of industry it is. So, for example, I do a lot of work in healthcare, so making sure that they're HIPAA compliant is obviously important. I also do work with the government, so making sure they're aligned with the NIST CSF or RMF framework or something like that. So everybody has some uniqueness as to what their goals are, but then the other big component is their risk level. So not every organization needs to be top, best in class on everything they do. Sometimes you don't have to be at the highest level, depending on what you do as an organization and what your risk tolerance is and what your risk level is. So for me, it's really about learning the organization, understanding what their requirements are, what their goals are, and then trying to see what they're attempting to achieve from a security standpoint. And oftentimes, too, it's they may bring me in thinking they need one thing, but after I learn their organization and what they're trying to do, we may shift that a little bit based on some input that I might have for what they're trying to do.
And so, no, I appreciate that. So when do you recommend a vCISO as opposed to an MSSP, or would you recommend both to someone?
Well, sure, that's a good question. And a lot of my clients that I work with are in that middle area where they might have one IT person, but the reason I got called in was usually one of two reasons. One, they had an audit finding or an insurance issue or something like that where they're being told, you need to get better at cybersecurity, and they'll bring me in to help them with that. The other is they have an incident. And one of the things I offer and do quite a bit of is incident response, where I'll come in and figure out, how did something happen and who was responsible, and do the forensics and that sort of investigation. So usually there I'm being brought in under some sort of compulsion, really. They need to get something done here. But oftentimes I may tell my clients, you're really at the point now where you need an MSSP, for example. You need someone that's monitoring your systems all the time and that can help you make sure you're doing vulnerability scans and that your systems are being patched, and that if there is an antivirus, EDR type of alert, somebody's looking at that. A vCISO, it depends a bit on the organization too, and I've got several clients where I serve as their vCISO, and I think it also depends on what they're trying to achieve, how large they are, and in some cases maybe they just need a vCISO. Where I've got very small clients where I do help them with log reviews and more strategic type of advisory services than the day-to-day hands-on keyboard work. But I also have seen a lot of MSSPs advertising vCISO services, but sometimes I'll get brought into those as well and find out that they're really not up to the level that you would expect from a vCISO. Sometimes they're advertising a little bit, I think, above what they can offer, and so that's caused some problems too with clients, where I'll be brought in and realize that all the things that should be going on really aren't happening. And I don't know if it's they just don't have enough time to spend that much time with each client, or they just lack experience, or what the issue might be.
So it seems like the first thing when you're brought into a client is do an assessment, and tell us a little bit about the components of an assessment.
Sure. And that's exactly right. So I generally use, and I may not do it verbatim initially, but I like the CIS controls. And so I think they're easy to understand. They're definitely easy. A lot of times when I talk to executives and boards, I will show them where they're at from a best practices standpoint, red, yellow, green, against the CIS controls. Sometimes I'll use the NIST cybersecurity framework, CSF, for that too. But for me, I've been doing this long enough where I can just ask a number of questions and get a pretty good sense of where they're at from a cybersecurity maturity standpoint. So I certainly ask them about all the high risk things. Tell me about how you provision accounts, and how do you know when someone doesn't need an account anymore? Are you using multi-factor authentication? And do you have separate administrative accounts than regular accounts? And what do you use for privileged access? And what kind of policies do you have? And honestly, most of the time, it's pretty much we don't have policies, and everybody uses an admin account. And so sometimes you have to be the bad guy in the room and say, okay, well, here's my recommendations anyway. You need to stop these practices, and then you need to start these practices. And it's definitely a journey, but I've also found most of the time the organizations are receptive to that.
Okay, that was where I was curious how this information is received.
Yeah.
No, that's really great. And so then I touched on before, and it's AI. It's everywhere, and it's being implemented everywhere, both for employees of companies, but also in their own personal life. And then then there's that crossover, bringing it on site to your employer, your AI ambitions. So things like, I guess what I'm referring to is shadow IT. So how do organizations align their AI ambitions with the reality of governance, compliance, and risk management?
Well, that's a great question. And this is one of those examples of the technology being way out in front of many organizations. And organizations, I think, are just being left behind in some aspects of this, where they've got so many other things they're focused on that AI isn't necessarily at the top of their list, especially from a policy standpoint. Certainly there are some businesses, but a lot of them are not. So I see really primarily two camps. One is we've got no policies, we let people use whatever AI tools they want, and we don't really even understand the risks involved. And then on the other side, I see we block all AI tools that we know about at the perimeter firewall. We don't let anybody install AI tools. We don't let anybody go to AI websites. Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini, they've all been disabled. So that's the two camps. But then, of course, the problem with that is, and they just log into their home computer and they do whatever they're going to do there. So I think what organizations are really struggling with now is where is that risk management balance for them? And the big risks, of course, are the loss of intellectual property. If people have these free accounts, they're uploading documents or talking about plans that a company may have or products that are about to be released or something, and that who knows how safe that is in a free account or who has access to that. We've also seen cases of healthcare organizations uploading medical diagnoses and other things to an AI tool to get some perspective. That's obviously an issue if not done correctly. So most organizations, I think, now are just trying to figure out how do we get our arms wrapped around this and what are the best practices, and do we need a written policy? Do we need some sort of technical control to go with that administrative control? And how much are we willing to allow our people to do with AI? And it is a real struggle, especially when you have companies that don't really have leadership that have that technology background or really understand all the realm of the possibilities for what can be going on with AI. And I think that's a great niche for a vCISO too, to come in and be that strategic advisor to help them balance the business needs, the operational needs, the risk, and then the technology to let them accomplish what they're trying to do, but in a safe way.
No, understand. And so how do you approach your client around this topic? In other words, what I'm trying to say is, you talk about the rigor of, compliance and so how do you transfer this conversation to the executive team around AI, where everybody, where they really have to know the risk that's in front of them?
Yeah. I think it depends a bit too on what they're specifically trying to do, what the use case is for AI, because it's very different to say our tech team wants to use AI to do continuous penetration testing and vulnerability management or code review versus we want everyone in the company to have access to an LLM. So I think that there definitely some different guidance based on the type of AI that's being introduced. But a lot of times I'll go into boards or executives and first just give them a little primer on what is AI, how does it work, and what are some of the security considerations. But then I also talk about, here's some of the benefits to AI, the force multiplier, the reduction in time doing mundane tasks, the automation that comes with things like chatbots, and then say, okay, we've talked about all the good things that can happen with AI. Here's some considerations that if you're going to implement it, you want to make sure you're doing it in a safe and secure way. And then I bring up things about loss of intellectual property and people using it inappropriately for a variety of things, and help them really just give them the information so they can make a risk-based decision for their business.
Understand. So how do your clients find you? So they understand they have a situation that's not good. They need help. What they have, what they're doing today, maybe nothing, by the way, but how do they determine that they need help, and how do they find somebody like you?
Well, I think the majority of the people that reach out to me are because somebody's telling them they need to. So I do a lot of work where a cyber insurance, or not a cyber insurance, but an insurance company is trying to underwrite a cyber policy. So they do some sort of an initial assessment and tell them, these are all the issues you need to get remediated before we'll even consider issuing you a policy. And so then they'll go look for a cyber person. Or, like I said, a lot of times I get involved in breaches. I do a lot of business email compromise cases where an organization will lose money because of a breach or a business email compromise case, and then they'll find me or somebody like me through a variety of ways. And then also just people who know they should be doing better in cybersecurity, so they'll look to that. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often as I wish it would, where I wish people would say, okay, when you start a new business, have a good accountant, have a good lawyer. I think have a good cyber person should be right up there, because anybody now has to have some level of cybersecurity maturity regardless of what your business is. But a lot of it is, of course, some website referrals or people just finding you online through Google search. But for me personally, most of it is referrals from other clients or just word of mouth is how usually I get most of my clients.
Understand. No, I that makes perfect sense to me. I appreciate that. So let's just talk a little bit. We talked about AI, we talked about small and medium-sized companies, and we talked about a little bit about HIPAA and compliance. But so, and we talked about the vCISO and your productized services. So so looking forward, do you think the vCISO model and a productized playbook will converge into a security as a service offering, where organizations essentially subscribe to a strategy and execution and readiness all at once?
I do, and I do see that happening now where organizations are paying for an MSSP or an MSP that's originally more on the IT side, but now they're getting into security because it's such a hot market. But a lot of these organizations already are, for a monthly fee, they're giving the client access to some sort of GRC platform where they can see where they're at from a cybersecurity perspective. A lot of these tools now will just generate policies for you that are about 90% there. You may have to do some localized tweaking, but most of it's there. They'll be scanning for vulnerabilities. They've got an MDR or XDR tool that they have deployed in the client network and are really acting as their SOC and maybe even doing some incident response. So I think while that exists today, that security as a service, I've also found that mileage may vary depending on the MSSP. There's a lot of, from my experience, there's a lot of reliance on automation and on tools, which can be okay, but I've also seen a lot of things get missed or a lot of false positives being chased. I've also seen a lot of the MSSPs either outsource a great deal of their security or they have very, very junior people because they're just not paying enough for high level security staff that you would see. So I think we're heading in that direction for sure, but I still see, at least today, the need for some real talent and experience to be able to come in. People who have done this and are professionals in this particular trade to help organizations get where they need to go. And one of the analogies I use, I was talking to a large law firm here locally about cybersecurity issues, and they said, "We have an MSP, so I think we're okay." And I said, "You might be, but," I said, "you would not go to your family practitioner for cardiac bypass surgery. You would go to a cardiologist." And think about IT and cybersecurity the same way, where you've got an MSP handling all your general IT things, creating accounts, fixing printers, doing those kinds of things. And certainly, I've done a lot of IT work, no bad things about that at all. Those are all super important tasks. But when you really get into the nuances of cybersecurity and understanding security engineering and how different things work and how do you make sure you're compliant with various regulations, it does require a specialist to do that and to make sure that they can have some peace of mind that it's being done correctly. And so the attorney's like, "Okay, I can understand that difference. You're right. I wouldn't go to I love my family doc, but I wouldn't go to him if I needed, or her if I needed triple bypass surgery or something like that." So yeah, I think we're headed there for sure, but it's a while before there's a turnkey solution, just based on what I've seen in the market today.
Yes, I agree. So the one thing we didn't talk too much about, which is certainly really critical, is the human factor. So talk about how when you come into, let's just say, 100-person company, and they had various experiences, maybe the MSSP, maybe some type of cyber consultant in the past, but now they've called you in. So on the human side, tell me a little bit about how you handle training and training the entire staff, all 200 people, on the human side.
Yeah, and that is a great point that is often overlooked. And I generally will offer some sort of cybersecurity awareness training. I've got a standard presentation that I take a lot of clients through, and it's everything from AI and emerging technologies like deep fakes and other things that we're seeing out there where people are being tricked into transferring money based on a video or audio, to even the things like phishing emails, because we still see over 90% of breaches are because of phishing emails. So training people both how to spot phishing emails and look for things like typo squatting, because that's so prevalent today, but also how AI is changing that too, where the grammatical errors and spelling errors that we used to look for don't really apply if somebody's using ChatGPT or Gemini to create their fish email. So definitely user awareness training, but also the whole, I think, idea is not just say, here's a phishing email and don't click on bad links, but trying to change the culture and the mindsets of the employees. And that's something I really work on both from the executive level of why this is so important. Look at cybersecurity not as just a compliance and a cost, but look at it as a business enabler and a strategic partner to help you get where you need to be. And look at how much breaches cost these days. Average breach is millions of dollars to remediate, over 4 million as of last year. So, and 60% of SMBs go out of business after a breach. So that is pretty compelling to executives and even to employees to say, one, you don't want to be the employee that caused the breach because you installed software you shouldn't have or inserted a USB that you shouldn't have. But also it could be your job that eventually gets taken out if the whole business has to close. So really trying to get people to see that this isn't just a checkbox or a compliance-driven effort, but why this is so important, how to report things to their IT team and the things to look for. But it's also good. I like to start there because some of the cultural changes to get people where they need to go is a little painful in organizations. And I certainly have scars from implementing this in organizations where I was a CISO. Or equivalent. Things like taking away somebody's admin privileges on a computer. Sorry, you can't be an admin anymore. You have to have a standard account. And just going through things, no, sorry, you can't store things in your personal Dropbox anymore. You've got to use company-provided cloud storage only. And there's a lot of angst that goes along with that. But I think if you get people in that mindset going through it, it's a lot easier.
No, I agree. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on where things are headed. And we touched a little bit on it, but we've been talking mostly about, I wouldn't say small companies, but I would say more medium or small or enterprise companies. But what is your vision for the future of cyber in with clients that you're working with?
I definitely see more and more state regulations coming into play with cybersecurity. So the feds, especially under the current administration, is definitely backing away from a lot of regulations, even in cybersecurity. Not completely. We see CMMC for Department of Defense contractors still going through, but by and large, a lot of the mandates that were coming from the federal government are now being backed off a bit and saying this is a state issue, the states need to deal with it. And now we see some states, Nevada, Utah, New York, California, many others are now implementing state regulations relative to cybersecurity. So I think that that's coming down the road. I also think that there's a lot of litigation in cybersecurity. We're getting to the point now where if you're responsible for a data breach because you just didn't implement basic safeguards like multi-factor, you're probably getting sued and you're probably going to lose that case because it's been determined to be these are just the basic cyber hygiene things that you should be doing. So I think that companies overall, especially in the small, mid-size businesses, are going to see more of those requirements coming down. But I also see that there's and this is nothing new, but certainly continuing all the as-a-service offerings. I get a lot of calls from clients who say, well, I've got Microsoft 365, I've got Google Workspace, and they tell me they're such and such compliant. And I tell a lot of clients, it really should say they're capable of being such and such compliant. Because if you just turn it on vanilla out of the box and don't do any of the modifications that get it to that compliance level, it's really not compliant out of the box. And so really, hopefully getting to the point where organizations see the need for a cybersecurity assessment and advisor to come in and really help them, fine tune some things at least, if not be a constant partner that they can work with as things go forward.
So you brought us some terrific points, but the one question: do you think that cyber security insurance will ever get to a point where it's mandatory, kind of like health insurance?
I could see for certain industries, yes, that there's going to be that requirement. I already see it in several contracts where If it may not be mandatory from a legal perspective, but if you want to do business with these certain other businesses, like B2B type of thing, or you're trying to go for a government contract, I'm seeing more and more of those agreements require that you not only have the general errors and omissions, but you also have a cybersecurity policy. So while it might not be a mandatory thing legally anytime soon, I think if people want to be competitive and be able to bid for contracts and things like that, they will need it.
Understand. Yeah, and you know, you don't. I mean, if you don't have health insurance, I mean, you get dinged.
Yep.
And you know, on your tax, I guess that's what it is. Right now, we're submitting those forms with our taxes, our tax return. So, no, this is really great, Josh, and certainly appreciate your perspective on this on these topics. And it was really great to learn a little bit about your perspective on things. Anything that you'd like to um, leave us with here?
Well, it's been good talking with you too. Thanks for the opportunity. And I would just say if anybody in your audience is interested in working with me at all, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help if I can. And also, I think for the business owners that might be listening, really, I think look at, are you doing everything from a cybersecurity perspective that you should be? Do you really know that your email systems and your whatever's doing authentication and things like that, your cloud solutions, are they all set up correctly and securely? And then for the people in the trenches doing IT and cyber, I would say, keep up the good work. It can be a stressful job and oftentimes a thankless job, but it is so important. We certainly saw during the height of the pandemic where overnight almost we saw IT people moving brick and mortar companies and schools and everything else to virtual immediately. They were the unsung heroes for sure of some of that. So I would say keep it up, keep fighting the good fight. And, I think a lot of the tools and things that are coming out now are making our lives easier in some cases too, which is always exciting to see. So it is certainly an exciting time to be in the cybersecurity industry. Lots of changes.
I agree. Lots of good things going on. Certainly, even the AI and machine learning, but being able to use it from the customer perspective. Obviously, the bad guys are using it and probably using it very well on a grand scope. But now, the stakeholders need to be able to use this kind of technology to protect themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, AI from a cyber defensive standpoint has introduced a lot of really great capabilities. So it's exciting to see that.
And so, a conversation for our next podcast.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you.